This year is my first time hosting Eat Breakfast, so I decided to crack open an old cookbook and try out this Blarney breakfast bake. We're going to start by dicing up 2 hearty loaves of bread. I used a whole wheat, whole grain bread that was sliced pretty thick. I wouldn't recommend sandwich bread for this because it's a lot thinner and it may make our bake a little too loose later. But if you do try it with sandwich bread, let me know how it went in the comments below. Once those are in nice big cubes, we'll lay them out on a cutting board overnight. If you don't want to wait that long, you can let them sit under a fan for a few hours instead. We've returned the next day and we're going to start prepping all of our veggies. First, we're going to chop up a large yellow onion. We'll place a few cuts horizontally. Then we'll turn the onion and place the cuts vertically. The number of cuts you place determines the sizes of your pieces. If you want big pieces, do less cuts. If you want tiny little pieces, do more cuts. Rotate the onion one more time, then slice straight down and toss it in a mixing bowl. Now we'll prep half a pound of mushrooms. I like to cut the stem off the bottom so I have a flat surface to make nice mushroom slices with. At some point, I do have to lay it flat again, but it's nice to have some traditional slices. We'll toss those in a mixing bowl with the onions and set them aside for now. Next, we'll cut up a whole tomato. I started by slicing out the stem, chopping the tomato in half, then scooping out the seeds. I eventually decided it was easier to scoop out the whole inside of the tomato and scoop the seeds and extra juices from that. This way I can preserve as much of the interior flesh as possible for later. Cut that into little cubes and set it aside for now. Finally, we'll whip out 2 packages of Midamar's Halal beef breakfast links and squeeze the sausage out of the casing. You can pick those up at the link in the description below, or you can head to midamarhalal.com to browse our full selection of halal products. Once the sausage is prepped, we'll head over to a frying pan and add in about a tablespoon of neutral flavored oil. I always use peanut oil, but really any kind will do. Now we'll add in our onions and mushrooms. Gently mix those together and fry until everything has softened and the liquid has mostly cooked out. We're going to toss in our halal breakfast sausage and we'll break that up as it cooks. Once it's all browned, we'll give it a taste and adjust for seasoning using salt and pepper. I thought mine could use a little bit more salt, so I added about a half a teaspoon of sea salt and tasted it again. Once it's to your liking, pull that off the heat and let it cool. You can also drain the fat now if you'd like, but I'd recommend saving at least a few tablespoons so our bake has a stronger sausage flavor. While that rests, we'll bring in a dozen eggs and crack those into a large mixing bowl. If you have a mixing bowl with a spout, I'd highly recommend using that. It'll make pouring the egg mixture into the bake much easier. Now we'll add in 3 cups of 2% milk, 2 teaspoons of ground mustard, and we'll add in about 1 teaspoon of uniodized sea salt. If you're using iodized salt, only use a half a teaspoon. Finish it with 1 teaspoon of black pepper, then we'll give it a proper whisking and make sure all the yolks are popped. Set that aside as we prepare for the bake. In a large casserole dish, we'll layer this up like an Ireland-themed lasagna. Start with some non-stick spray, top with some of the bread, but just enough to mostly cover the bottom. Then we'll layer our tomatoes, layer on some freshly shredded Blarney cheese. If you can't find that, you can replace this with Gouda. Now we'll layer on some freshly shredded cheddar. Then we'll add half of the sausage and veggie mix. Now we'll repeat layering until we use up all the ingredients, including the little bits of bread. Then we'll pour in our egg mixture. Now we'll bake that at 325 degrees and let it cook for 50 to 55 minutes or until you can insert a knife and have it come out cleanly. Once that's all cooked and the knife comes out clean, we'll pull it out of the oven and let it rest for 10 minutes and that's it. You're ready to eat! I hope you enjoyed this recipe and I'll see you next week for another delicious halal recipe.